And I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands upon which we're meeting today and pay my respects to elders past and present. For me, I'm based in Horsham on the lands of the Jadwa, Jabba, Jali, Wagaya, Jabagog, and hang on, Jadwa, Jabba, Jali, Wagaya, Jabagog, and
Balak.
Waterbalek. Oh, thank you, people. And one in Horsham, one of the features of Horsham is through originating in the Pyrenees and then going right down through to Hindmarsh. Lake Hindmarsh is a beautiful Wimmera River lined with gum trees, and it's a very peaceful place to be. Lots of bird life. It's really lovely. So if you're ever visiting Horsham, and come to this country, please take a moment to appreciate the beautiful river here in the town. So welcome everybody. It's been a while since I've been to one of the workforce meetings, and I was very, very keen to come because the team's always buzzing afterwards, just with the amount of work that everyone's putting in and just the collective effort and seeing the work that's done. And it's not necessarily work that people wouldn't have been doing, it's work that you are doing, but seeing it I guess collated and discussed in one place and celebrated, it's really, really amazing to see. And workforce, we know, is one of our biggest challenges across the whole Wimmera South West, and it's just so I guess it's so satisfying to see that we're actually, we're really trying to do something about it. We're trying to make local solutions to our problems. So thank you for your time and your interest and your engagement in this work. I think it's really, really important. I don't want to talk too much because I know you've heard enough from DET and there's other people to hear from. Just wondering, would you mind popping into the chat your name, your role, your organisation, just so that people can see who's here and also maybe create some linkages. If you've got any questions along the way, I know that it's hard when there's slides, sometimes hard for us to see. So please raise your hand. You can raise it electronically or in person, or just write your question into the chat, which is almost easier sometimes, and we'll pick it up and make sure that it's included. So, and if we miss, interrupt, because it's about the conversation as much as anything. So thank you. I'm going to hand over to Rach. Rach is going to do a quick recap on the process to date, just in case there's anyone that's not quite across it or anyone that needs a refresh. Feel free, again, if you've got any questions, interrupt.
We won't have too
questions.
many PowerPoints today either. This is the first bit, so hopefully not too much of a death by PowerPoint meeting today, which will be good, I think, to hear from everybody else. But just at the moment, we'll hit you with the PowerPoint pretty hard. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay, so yeah, as you just said, Deb, we'll just look at where we started. So obviously the purpose of this meeting today is around sharing the collaboration that's been happening, because we've had some amazing collaboration over the past year. We also want to look at identifying new opportunities as well. But it is good to go back to where we started. And when we think about where we were 12 months ago, we were constantly hearing about the critical lack of qualified workforce in our area, but also that no one stakeholder had the time or capacity to be able to address the issue, which is why we've started this work in the first place. So we did talk extensively about this back in October, so I'm not going to go on about too much, but basically once we identified what the issues were, we focused our efforts using a logic model. And then we switched to taking action. So our actions have ranged from really simple changes in practice, like changing our language, ensuring our language reflects the professionalism of the early childhood education and care sector, to far more complex collaborations, and some of those we'll hear about today. We've seen some really great outcomes. We've also seen some setbacks, and we're really conscious that one of those, and I'm not certain, I think we have some of the people who are involved in this online at the moment, but one of those was a failed grant application that we had encouraged our providers to pursue really heavily. And unfortunately, when those things take that significant time investment, that kind of outcome can be particularly disappointing. So we do note that it hasn't all been great successes, but we have learnt a lot along the way. So, and the great thing about this particular approach and the way that we've gone about it is that it's ensured that everyone in the area has a role to play in some way contribute to increasing our early childhood workforce. And We haven't solely been focused on new and really exciting things or really complex initiatives, but it's also been about embedding what's out there already. So basically, what we wanted to do is make sure that we don't reinvent the wheel if there's already one there, and don't miss any opportunities that are available that might increase the workforce in our area. Now, you do have to get really excited about my PowerPoint skills at this next point. But anyway, we did have, you'll see why in a second, this has actually led to what has been referred to as an explosion of interest in early childhood in our area. And this is something that we just could not have anticipated 12 months ago. So how did we get here? We got here with two really committed working groups that have really led the way in this collaborative approach. So in the Wimmera, we've got a project that's funded by state government called By5, and the project looks at early years systems and attempts to remove the barriers to quality early childhood experiences for children in the Wimmera and Southern Mallee, where the results are relatively poor compared with their peers across the state. And so part of this work actually started looking at workforce. So it was natural then that the Wimmera working group then sat under By5 and is now led by By5. So the DET site, sorry, you can actually see when you compare the two working groups, very similar players. But we do have some other connections in the By5 side of things, and that was largely thanks to Steph from the Victorian Skills Authority, who really did an enormous amount of work in linking us into various other departments. So, and I know some of them, I can see some of them on the screen at the moment. So thanks to everyone who's been involved in that. But the idea of these working groups is that it brings together those of us that are wanting to test those and really drive some substantial changes in practice. And then we can share the learnings back to this particular group, and then others can decide whether or not they want to try and replicate these ideas as well. So before we get into the meaty part of today's agenda, which is far more important than us sort of recapping, just wanted to touch, like sort of go back to where we started and what's sort of informing our work at the moment, and and will inform the work until the end of this year. So just to remind, our main objectives were around early childhood being perceived as a positive career option. Secondary and other prospective students are supported to study early childhood, and supporting existing workforce through multiple capacity building strategies. So that's been the overarching logic model that has driven our work at the moment. And what we're going to see as we go through today's session is several different examples of this being achieved, and it has led to this explosion of interest in early childhood. So that objective that we were trying to achieve around creating that aspiration to work in early childhood, we are doing a whole lot better than we had been previously, and it's a credit to the collaboration and of this particular all of our stakeholders in the area. So I'm going to stop sharing. Deb, I'll hand back to you again now.
Thanks, Stacey. You'd think after 2.5 years, unmuting would be really natural, but it's not. It doesn't always come that easily. All right, I'm going to hand over to Emily Lee Ack from the Southwest LEN. Emily's going to provide some slides and have a chat about the collaboration between Southwest TAFE and Southwest LEN to coordinate student placement. So Emily, are you right to go?
I am, and I don't have slides because
okay.
death by PowerPoint is a real thing, and I don't want anyone to expire in the context of this meeting. I'd rather just talk through some of the work that we've been doing. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk in a little bit more depth about the partnership that we have that's emerging really between ourselves and Southwest TAFE in this particular area. And I just thought I'd give the group a bit of an overview of some of the work that we've been doing, and then what we've found as a result of sort of really digging down and exploring the environment for particularly work placements at our end of the region. So at the end of last year, and as a result of the explosion that has been noted, we started a conversation with Southwest TAFE, who have responsibility for Bed in Schools, early childhood delivery, as well as general entry certificate level courses, to talk about how we might start to think about the needs of students who require placements to complete their qualification. In particular, I think there was some shared concern not only between ourselves and TAFE, but also schools, and to a lesser extent students and families, about whether or not everyone who needed a placement in early childhood would be able to get one, noting that the restrictions in COVID have placed a significant amount of pressure on employers to provide who've basically been unable to provide those placements, which has been a kind of cruel nexus of COVID restrictions in the settings, as well as the restrictions placed on school students exiting school environments for work placements. So we're really aware that that there's a critical workforce need, as well as a very distinct need to ensure that that COVID that COVID safe environments continue to be honoured, and that we were not putting additional pressure on workforces that, as all of you would know, even this year in COVID normal, are still really struggling with the challenges of COVID and its impact on our services. So at the beginning of this year, when we had enrolments finalised and students were starting to enter their study, we had a series of conversations with South West TAFE, and as a result of that, committed to undertaking an environment scan of the employer environment in order to figure out how many placements might be available, and to match those against the placements that students were seeking, to see whether it was possible on a desktop analysis to actually meet the needs of students coming through that course offering, to get to the number of hours that they needed in a work placement in order to complete their qualification. What we wanted to do was to work with TAFE and, as I said, employers, to map both the placements that were currently available, as well as the student need for placements, including analysis of issues like the timing of those placements, the type of placements that that employers were able to provide, understanding that for some employers, block placements were going to be a significantly more achievable deliverable than a week, one day a week, or the kind of more the structure that we're more familiar with through structured workplace learning, which is that weekly engagement with an employer. And also acknowledging that over the course of a year, you may not have to undertake a work placement throughout that entire time in order to achieve the hours that are required. So what we wanted to do was to map the placements, map the needs of the students, and also map the urgency of those needs. So with South West TAFE providing both a non-school entry and vet in schools delivery of early childhood, we knew that there are some students who, in order to complete their qualifications, would need their placements sooner. So we also wanted to figure out who needed to be into the system most quickly in terms of those placements. We also wanted to start to identify where gaps might be. So we learned very early on that there was a very significant difference between the approaches of various parts of the sector to how they were easing out of COVID restrictions, or the varying levels of capacity in different parts of the service delivery system in terms of staffing availability to supervise students, as well as capacity to engage in a system where it might not just be one student, it might be a series of students and in a whole different series of permutations with regards to those needs. So what we found quite quickly, though, is that that there was also an opportunity in that environmental scanning work, which was led by Denise Madden in my team, to start to also provide some gentle advocacy with employers about the importance of student hosting and the importance of employers trying wherever they can, and acknowledging that the pressure has been intense in order to address workforce needs, that it is that ultimately without those placements students can't qualify, and if they can't qualify they can't enter the workforce. So there was also an opportunity there to start to talk about why this was important as a workforce development activity, rather than something that was offered to young people in particular in our cohort as a favour, or I guess a sort of charitable exercise as opposed to a workforce development activity. So that was really important as well. What we found, though, was that the process of undertaking the environmental scan actually increased capacity in itself. So while we were able to map the existing opportunities that were available in both council and private and not-for-profit providers, and that was the intention of doing the environmental scan, we found that the process of doing the scan actually created additional opportunities, because in engaging in a conversation about what was available, what many employers found was that they actually had more capacity than they realised. They were able to engage their staff and managers in a process of understanding what was involved in the process of hosting students. And so we really, we built a quite solid series of shared expectations, I think, through that process as well. We were also able to get a much better sense of the ebb and flow of capacity over the course of the year, both within the education settings and within employers' sort of pressure points throughout the year. We know, for example, that some schools are much happier to release students on block placement and much happier to do that or have a culture of doing that in school holidays. So we were able to then negotiate in a different way about how some of those placements might function. But we also had the opportunity to have a conversation with schools about where block placements outside of school holidays might be the difference between, you know, achieving a qualification or the certificate dimension of the qualification or not. So also able to start a conversation about, and I guess that's the fundamental principles thing about education, to start thinking about teaching to the student, not to the subject. So if that student needs time release from the other parts of their study in order to achieve that block placement and complete their certificate, that we were encouraging the school environments to figure out a way of making that happen and making that work. We also, through this process, have had an opportunity to, again, have a really robust discussion about urgent placements and where those priority settings needed to be. And that really has only been gained as a result of centralising that process and thinking it through with a sort of next level bird's eye view about what's going on for everyone, and to start seeing it, I guess, not so much for me as a jigsaw puzzle, but more of a chess game of trying to get through that process. And we also found that this is a sector where, I guess, just to give some contrast between some of the areas in which we work, while there were some students who were undertaking placements that were as a result of their direct contact with a service or a connection they already had with a service, that the culture around placements in this sector is very different to something like construction, where employers would have a very strong expectation, or many employers would have a strong expectation that students would engage directly with them to seek out a placement. My sort of overriding sense is that this is a sector where there's a much stronger expectation of students, schools and the system generally, for there to be a third party like the LEN involved in that process. So I would say just as a sort of conclusion to this piece of work, it's been a significant an important piece of work, because we now not only understand what's available in the short term, we've created opportunities that will slide through into the medium term as well. But I think we've also created a lot less confusion in the system about who various parts of the system will have to engage with. And while it's not necessarily something that that the LEN, it's certainly not an issue for us of seeking to kind of command and control, but what we have noted is that we believe that the experience for everyone will be significantly less stressful and more equitable for everyone in the system, if there is that level of coordination in place, which the environment scan has made possible. I think that's all I really needed to say. In some ways, this isn't rocket science. It's literally having meetings, creating spreadsheets, matching people together. There's nothing new under the sun, and we certainly don't, we're certainly not suggesting that this is highly innovative practice, but it is important and it does take resources. So I would certainly commend it as if people are working in clusters and place-based areas where they want to better understand the system. I think just assigning some resource to make that happen has been an incredibly valuable piece of work. I think not just for the LEN, but also for the others that we've worked with. That's it from me.
Thanks, Emily. It sounds like an incredibly rewarding piece of work. Effort to outcome sounds really good. I just want to open it up. Has anyone got any questions, comments?
Yeah, I was going to just ask, do you have that data from the analysis compiled into something you can share, Emily?
I'll have to have a look at that's a really great question, Janelle. I think I'll just have to have a look at how it gets to an aggregated level where we're not naming anyone. So I'll have a look at what the kind of more systems level data is, and I'm more than happy to share that with this group.
Yeah, because we're finding down here, up here I should say, Emily's in Warrnambool up in Hamilton, because I'm the structured workplace learning coordinator in Hamilton, and we put the traineeships in place this year. We're finding even this year through our work experience focus, coming out of COVID, there's so many students, because they haven't had work experience and their careers developed, they actually don't know what they don't know. And we're finding the discussions around, like every vocation, not just early childhood learning, they just don't have that capacity to understand what it involves. And we're realising that we need to start at year 9s and 10s, go back to root levels, and maybe create some awareness in the different vocations, back to breaking it down, and early childhood is one of those. We need to say to them, this is what the careers pathways here are, before we can start getting them to think about how they will conduct a work placement in that area.
Yeah, and I think it's also and Anne and I have had a version of this conversation before, and I think it's been part of this conversation too. It is a supply and demand issue, and in smaller communities, so Warrnambool kind of is one part of our region, but for smaller communities where you've got students who have travelling, have barriers to travel, or limited opportunities to engage, or need to engage in their placements in particular ways. Then understanding that from a year 9 and 10 level will lead to far better planning, I think, in terms of how much capacity the system needs to have in place in order to honour, both all of the students who want to study a particular area, but also making sure that those placements exist. You're totally right.
Yeah. Well, I know for one, in Hamilton, we've got no problem with the placements, thanks to CPSG and Good Shepherd and various other providers. It's just about trying to get the delivery of the course to the students. So let's hope we can get that happening.
Any other questions or comments? Just pipe up if you can. I can't see everyone at the board. Can you see this being a helpful initiative at your service? And do you think there could be any possibility for replication by FedTAFE and the Wimmera Southern Mallee Land? I wonder if people have thoughts on that. Well, that's
I'm sure from Wimmera Southern Mallee Land. Yeah, look, congratulations, Emily. Sounds like you've been doing some great work there. We have been doing similar work, but I suppose not to that level. So it's certainly something that with Fed Uni and with our local.
I had a bit of trouble hearing you there, Tim. Sorry.
Yeah, I've lost Tim as well. I think it's
Yeah. Maybe you might be able to come back later. Okay, has anyone else got any other comments? You can come back to Tim if he's able to rectify that.
So just from a, sorry.
Yeah. No, go.
Just from a service provider perspective, Emily, just the importance of, and I wrote your comments down around that shared understanding and agreement. Like, that's so important, and the ability to have that flexibility to say, okay, well, if these sort of placement opportunities don't exist, well, what else can we actually do? And, you know, some really positive conversations even that we've had with you know, with the local providers, just around, well, is there, you know, particularly we've even had conversations about some of our more rural areas, and about how we actually transport, you know, and there is actually some solutions, local solutions, that we can get them out to some various, you know, sites, even if they're not in a position where they're able to transport themselves. So, you know, and that to me is a really area sort of region-specific solution, to be able to make the most of those opportunities for placement, which may be outside of the bigger regional centres, I suppose.
Yeah, I totally agree, Miriam. I think that one of the things that I think that the benefit of trying to analyze this from every part of the system means that you can say, well, you know, student X is going to need to be prioritized for a Mortlake placement, for example, because that student has no capacity to travel and can't access that. Or, you know, we're out of placements in Timboon, therefore, how do we create some transport opportunities to make sure that student can get there? Or you know, as you quite rightly say, like there are other ways to deal with it. And I think we were kind of geared up for the possibility of having a massive shortfall in terms of placements versus students. But as I said, what was really pleasing for us was that when we started a conversation with employers, I think that conversation in itself created capacity, because people started to think about, you know, how can we help? Like, I think everyone starts this conversation wanting to be a positive force, and wanting to do what they can in their part of the system to make things easier for everyone else. So yeah, so I think sometimes I think these processes are seen as kind of like a purely academic exercise, but in fact, they're always capacity building in my experience.
Georgina.
Yeah, look, well done with that. That's really great research. And I think one of the things that's really required, and we're seeing this more and more, is that local solution to local needs. And I think, you know, we've got a presentation a bit further on with the pre-accredited training and how Centre for Participation and WADIA have worked together, because the TAFE could not deliver on the program that we wanted to deliver in that community, because it's a thin market and often numbers become an issue. So sometimes you need a different approach for different communities, but having that background information is really, really important. So well done to you, and thanks.
All right, any final comments before we move on? Okay, let's take a trip down the highway to Tracy Gould from Combined Preschools of Southern Grampians. We're going to have a look at a collaboration that resulted in school-based apprenticeships commencing in Hamilton. So firstly, Tracy, can you tell us who's involved in the collaboration and everyone's role?
So the collaboration, it started really with a discussion with Janelle and myself, and only because we also have a personal relationship, but we've been doing some careers focus beforehand, and my son and Janelle's son are both doing school-based apprenticeships, and I'm like, well, how can we do this for early childhood? So Janelle jumped onto it and rolled with it, and so it's with her participation in the LEN. So she was key in coordinating and promoting the collaboration, and also being that first point of contact for students in the schools. Westvic is the apprenticeship provider. We've got Southwest TAFE as the training provider, and Good Shepherd as well, who are another provider in Hamilton. They weren't in a position to host any school-based apprenticeships, but what they are doing is they've committed to host our placements to do the 0 to 2 part of the qualification, which is fantastic, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to do it. And Westvic have come on board, and they're actually going to fund the wages for that placement. So that's really exciting for us.
That's awesome. What does it look like, Tracy, for the apprentice and for the the service that hosts the apprentice?
So this year we have 2 students and they're both at the same service but on separate days. And so they come in for 1 full day in the service, and then they've got about 4 or 5 hours which they do in their own time. I think at their school give them like a half a day to do their classwork. And so we've hooked them up with our pedagogical leader here as a support person. So Nat's available, she touches base with them once their training. We've had a bit of a hiccup with getting their training underway, but Nat's sort of their support person as far as their classwork goes, and as well as the training providers. So it's working. So we've got one comes in on a Wednesday and the other one comes in on a Friday, and then they're both studying at the same time. So we're trying to have some catch up between the 2 girls as well, which is really good.
Yeah, it's great. It's great Nat's able to provide that support too. That would be a real linchpin, I'd imagine. You mentioned you had a hiccup, but if there any other challenges that you've experienced?
Look, actually, I was going to say the other bonus we're finding with it is that the service really likes having the same student come back every week, and they've really enjoyed having that consistency, and they've found that really positive, instead of having different students come in for a block here and a block there, or a 4-week block, and then you've got another one coming in for a 4-week block. So that's been another bonus. I think they're able to build a better relationship. The students building a better relationship with the children as well, and they're just getting to know the system a little bit better, instead of sort of being in and then they're gone back onto back into classwork or whatever else. The biggest challenge has been getting the trainees signed up with the training provider. We've obviously had the change in training package, which was a bit of a hiccup, and I think there was probably, I'm going to say, downfall in communication. So we had assumed that our trainees were signed up and ready to go and working, and it was only at the end of term, so they pretty much started the first week of term, that we found out that they still hadn't been signed up by the training provider. So there was a few terse emails and conversations going on for a few weeks there, and I think it's nearly sorted. I know the trainer herself has been up and now at least met with the students, so that is something, but that was sort of a bit frustrating. I don't imagine that would happen, next year when we try and do this again. I think that would be probably not. I think there is a bit of a hiccup as well, getting them signed on at the apprenticeship, with the apprenticeship system. So again, I think and I think it's not just, it's right across the board. So, getting them signed on with the apprentice provider and then having that communication go through to the training provider, there's a bit of a delay in that from a system end. I don't understand it, but Janelle can probably comment on that a little bit more.
Yeah, well, what happens there, Westvic, so they operate as a group training RTO, where basically they are the employer and subcontract to the Kinder and whoever the employer is. So therefore there's them, and then you've got an apprenticeship provider who then coordinates the actual apprenticeships for the government and the funding, and then they also need to register them and get the sign up done through whoever the training provider is going to be to deliver the actual training. And I think there's been a huge backlog across the board just because of the incentives coming out of COVID, and it's right across the board. I've had quite a number of employers and students say that their sign-ups have been delayed, which doesn't really help, but therefore it is what it is. So, but hopefully we're on track now.
I think it's something that everyone will be able to take away. That's something everyone will be, the first thing they look at is making sure everything's signed up and organised early from your key learning.
It's a great model. Yeah. I spoke to the 2 girls at the schools in the last couple of weeks, and I know they're really, really enjoying the whole, the placement, what they're going to get out of it. They enjoy where they're going and actually what they're doing with the kids at the end of the day, which is what's important.
It would also be lovely to see the relationships that can be built up over the year between the students and the children, having that consistency across the year. It's really, could be really wonderful for everyone involved.
I should also say that one of our trainees is Miriam's daughter. And, she just gets it, because Miriam's obviously been in the industry a long time, being from her family daycare background. And so she just gets it. It's really, they're both a pleasure to have. I think one of the key learnings we've taken out of it is that just the need to be flexible. And anybody who has worked with me before, I'm always an ideas person, and I like to move forward, and I like things to just happen. And so one of the students, for example, so she's doing year 12, and so there was obviously a concern that she wouldn't be able to fulfill her placement hours. So we'd already thought about that, and we had already agreed that we would employ her next year so she could finish her qualification. We weren't going to leave her in the lurch. And so again, that was just that communication breakdown that nobody actually said, well, how are we going to do that? Because I said we'd already thought that through. So that's probably, and I think the other thing, having the girls in school, is I just think it's a really good promotional opportunity for ongoing school-based apprenticeships, because we see us continuing to do this going forward. Obviously, funding is going to always be an issue, but we would like to be able to support it as much as we can. And we're probably seeing an increase in work experience students coming through as well.
Thanks, Tracy and Janelle. Have we got any questions or comments? Thanks. And we'll look forward to seeing how that one continues to travel as the year goes on. And hopefully, you know, looking forward to Miriam's daughter getting her bachelor in a few more years and taking on a service. Yes.
We're doing our bit for the workforce.
Good on you. That's what we like to see. All right. Now we're going to go back down towards the coast, down to Portland. I hope there's some whales coming in at the moment. I've seen a few pictures on Facebook. Miriam's going to speak about the explosion of interest and an idea that had an impact. Hand over to you, Miriam.
Thanks, Deb. So I think some of you have sort of probably heard our story over the last little while, but I guess something that's, you know, been really exciting in this space is, you know, and I think that were Emily's words about the explosion. So we're using that because we've really seen that the generated interest in early years, which we know that 18 months ago it was a very different environment. So I can remember about 18 months ago sitting down with TAFE at that time, looking at, they had some challenges around keeping students engaged, particularly because of the disruption to placements due to COVID. We'd also just seen locally that there didn't feel to be a lot of interest. So we really started to look at, you know, well, what can we do? Who can we partner with? You know, what are the opportunities out there to be able to promote, early years as a career pathway? So the other thing that was coming to mind is that we were seeing lots of young people who, you know, may have been, you know, doing university, enrolled in university, living away from home, which can be a challenge for young people in these areas. And I think it grew even more challenging through COVID because, you know, generally a lot of these people would have had sort of, jobs, in the city and those sorts of things. And as we know, with all the lockdowns and things, I guess the environment really did change. And I think lots of people were either returning or considering what are their options to sort of have a career pathway a bit closer to home. So I think for us, you know, obviously we were brought together by some of these conversations that we were having. And I remember probably the thing that first started it off was when we started having some discussions with the Len and with Tracy from CPSG about the Jobs Galore information session. So I think that was probably one of the first things that happened at the very beginning. And then since that, I guess we really wanted to promote it at a local level. So our staffing profiles that we did on social media, I think were really, really important to give people in our community a good understanding of what's possible. And I think what we've highlighted through them is that, you know, we had some staff who started off in assistant roles who later on who worked and actually were able to achieve a bachelor qualification. And I also think that having the cohort of trainees that we initially had, I think that their promotion and word of mouth and sort of going back to other young people, and the fact that we built their profiles sort of online, and, you know, we're fortunate, obviously, being a council, you know, council managed service, you know, we had access to be able to promote some of these profiles on the council Facebook page, which were really well received. And, you know, it was interesting to see the different types of comments. So, you know, some of them were around interest and you know, some of it was targeted around recruitment, but it did generate lots of interest from, you know, families who said, oh, I didn't, you know, Kirsty, I didn't know you worked at that service for that many years. Or, you know, we had other staff who said, oh, I didn't realise at one point you worked at Dartmoor. And, you know, it really created that sort of conversation online, which we know in particular smaller communities, you know, that can carry quite a bit of weight. And I guess it sort of put us, I felt like early years sort of got put back on the radar. Yeah, so that's probably a bit of a summary of you know, and most recently, you know, we've also, you know, I guess the importance of the partnerships, the collaboration, that open communication. And, you know, we were recently approached by the LEN to do some career promotion videos. So we actually had a day of filming at one of our services with one of our trainees. So just really to, and that's currently in development, but it's really just to continue to promote that sector. But, you know, we've also seen, and, you know, I think I mentioned this, I think when we realised that the VET program had commenced at the local secondary college, and then we saw the list of students, I think we almost all nearly fell off our chairs, because the list was, you know, there was over 20 students on that list, and you know, looking at that and then thinking, okay, this is really fantastic, and then, you know, and then it's about looking at, well, you know, what are the placement opportunities? How do we work through the challenges of that? So, you know, I think it's there's lots of interesting things happening in that space.
So, Miriam, before we go on to a bit more information about how you're going to support all that, the explosion of interest in those students, does anyone have any sort of questions around the development of those videos, those profiles, or any comments? I just also wondered, do you film them all yourselves, or you know, have you got someone particularly skilled at council, or how did you do it?
So we did have, so with the staffing profiles, we mainly use photographs. We did during COVID film some videos ourselves and post them on Facebook or send them out to families with some learning activities. So that was probably another thing that we did. But the most recent video, there was the LEN got someone to actually do that piece of work. So
yeah, terrific. We were talking with Andrew Hardiman, our Pathways person, yesterday, and he was saying, you know, it's the power of young people talking to other young people should never be underestimated. And I think that's one of the features of the videos that you've had on Facebook. I know I follow them, and you know, it's amazing seeing the young people. Anyway, any other questions before we move on? Because Miriam made a beautiful segue into her next point of discussion before I interrupted her. All right, Miriam, tell us how you're going to support all these people now.
Yeah, so I guess, and you know, and this is the part that's brought some challenge, and it's had to be a real balance. And I've spoken really openly about some of the challenges that we're experiencing. So we all know that the sectors, you know, we've got across our services, we've got a very large cohort of new staff. So whether they're new graduates, whether we've got trainees, we've got people that are upskilling, there's a real, I guess there's been a real sort of addition of new staff coming through. So, and with that brings its own set of challenges. So I guess probably one of the most critical things for us is bringing the staff on the journey with understanding that there wasn't, no one had a magic solution, I guess, in terms of how we were going to work through some of these staffing pressures. So it was about bringing the staff on the journey and saying, okay, well, what can we do? How do we, what's the best way? We were fortunate that we'd had some good experiences, some hesitation for a period of time, because some staff may have thought that would be additional pressure on them. So we had to really carefully look at it and say, okay, well, what parts can we ask the educators to actually support? What parts can we ask the team leaders to support? So we've tried to do a sort of wraparound. So what we've done for the trainees in particular is we have tried to, and agree with Tracy's comments, like the importance of them having that stability or being in one program predominantly, so that they've got an opportunity to sort of settle, to build the relationships. The staff really value that because they then feel like they're a genuine team member rather than having somebody that's coming in and out. Having that, so having that consistent place for them, even within the integrated services. Like at the moment, we've got one of our trainees who's in the room with predominantly 2 to 3s. We've got another one with predominantly that's in the sort of 3 to 5. So, but just really having those open conversations with staff and seeing what works, what doesn't. If that particular, because sometimes having more adults in a room can make the room quite heavy. So then you backtrack and you go, okay, well, can we use an extra set of hands somewhere else? Those sorts of things. So really just open and honest conversations with the staff, bringing them on the journey, a wraparound approach. So having the mentor. The team leaders meet with each of the trainees weekly for half an hour, just as an additional touch base. We've tried to create as many opportunities for them to have study time together. We've created some opportunities for them to have some time together visiting some of our services, particularly now that we're in a position, because that was probably one of the feedback, some of the feedback we'd got from some trainees in the past, that through COVID, they didn't get as much opportunity to go around to the different services, just to have a look at the different practice and that sort of thing. So we've been in a position to do that more, which I think has been really welcomed, and it's been great for the staff more broadly to meet them, because they're seeing them, the profiling on Facebook and we've all got our internal groups, so there's that connection. But it's really nice for them, so we had our trainee who predominantly works across the kindergartens. She's had an opportunity to get together with, and they've travelled up to Kathleen Milliken Centre and they've spent the day there. So, really trying to, I guess, make it a really positive experience for them, so that there is that word of mouth and that, continual building of, I guess, what it means to work in early years, what career paths you can undertake. And I speak really openly to the team. I'm an educator, so and I currently sit in the role as Children's Services Manager. So, the opportunities are endless. We've got there's lots of effort that goes into supporting people to upskill or gain qualifications, and I think that's a really great thing. So just promoting that learning environment is, I think, has been really important. But bringing your staff on the journey, and also being really aware and knowing when you need to step in and help or provide additional support or rethink things.
Miriam, because you've had such an explosion, you've got a number of students. Have you got sort of any thoughts when you would ramp up promotion again? Like, do you need a bit of period of consolidation?
We do, Deb, and I think we need that across the board. But in saying that, it's not going to stop us from continuing to, I guess, make sure that it's still at the forefront of what people are thinking, because we still want to have a profile, and and we think it's really important to share, because I think too, one of the things is that maybe there was a bit of a lack of understanding of what we actually do and the possible career pathways. And we had when, for example, one of the trainees we had previously, they really just wanted an opportunity to work locally for a period of time, but their sort of end goal was to be a teacher.
Yes.
But I don't think people actually understand that. So I think that there's still a role to promote that part of it.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm wondering if there are any other providers that might have examples of, that they'd like to share around supporting students on placements, as well as the examples Miriam's provided.
Sorry. I'd like to mention ALN have commenced this year. We've got an enhanced work experience program, because we identify, well, particularly after 2 years of remote learning, but students are just, feel like that they have to only do work experience in their own town, and out in these rural areas, they're impacted by, not being able to have travel or accommodation. So we've got a new project that's commenced, and I can share it in the chat. There's a brochure to support it for employers as well. It's in partnership with Rotary, where we've set up the opportunity that students can go to other centres or other areas, and if they need to be supported with accommodation and or transport, some of them even just need transport because they might, for example, live in Balmoral and need to get to Hamilton or Casterton for their placement and things like that. So we have that initiative that's commenced this year. So I'll share in the chat a brochure about that if anyone's interested in that, and it's got all the contact details.
Janelle, is that a local initiative? Like, is that replicated in any other parts of the region?
So it's the Glenelg and Southern Grampians Lend. So so it's Hamilton, Portland, our Lend. But it's a twofold thing, where we look to send students that may want to go further afield to other areas, either within our region or out of our region. So the Western District, which covers, I'm not sure, Rotary, whatever that Rotary district is. I know our Lend's also connected with the Lends in those areas to promote it through them, so that if they have students wanting to come our way or vice versa, they can be supported. And we've already had 3 successful placements where it's just worked a treat, because Rotary are really looking to offer something in the youth space, and this really fits well with them, and the students have been well looked after and have received far more than even their work experience out of it. So
fabulous.
So I'll share the brochure on the chat.
Fantastic. Tracy.
I was just thinking when Miriam was talking, we would be open to having, I would love to have a trainee in all of our services. The problem we have is we're only sessional kindergarten, and we don't have that turnover of staff. So we can't guarantee them future employment, or can we fund them in our budget at the moment? So, I think that's somewhere where some extra financial support would be really helpful. Because we're not in the position that Miriam is, with a whole lot of trainees on the floor. Because I know it is challenging. We try to limit only having sort of 1 student at a time in a service, because we generally only have 2 or 3 staff in a service. So it's an additional workload for those staff as well.
Good point.
Sorry, I was just going to make a point. I'm struggling. I'm not sure if others are, but I couldn't open that link. So what I was going to suggest, Janelle, if you want to maybe send it, I'm assuming it looks like it's PDF. So can you just send it through and I'll attach it with when we send out the minutes with this meeting? Is that all right? Thanks.
All right, if there's no other comments, I'll hand over to Rachel for the next pre-accredited training, Wimmera Southern Mallee.
Yeah, no worries. So just to give a little bit of context to how this one came about, this was where we had our colleagues in the Victorian Skills Authority bring together that group of stakeholders that I mentioned a little bit earlier. So these were all our stakeholders in the Wimmera, such as DJPR, Jobs Victoria mentors and advocates, TAFEs, Jobs and Skills Centres, local jobs facilitators, ACFI, a whole heap of different players in the space. And from that particular group, the idea came for this pre-accredited program, and then by Five have taken over the running the coordination of that particular project. So this has been, as Georgina actually mentioned earlier, it's been a really interesting collaboration between the Centre for Participation and WDEA, and we've got Robbie and Leah. I'm not certain whether Leah's had an unwell child today and has also had some technical issues, so may not actually be here. We might be looking at Nathan speaking on behalf, but I'll just throw over to Robbie and someone from WDEA to talk about this at the moment. So just want to start by looking at what the program offered. So I'm not sure which one of you will speak to this, but
I'm happy, Nathan, if you want to talk, or I'm happy to talk. So I guess initially I think it was Georgina actually reached out to us initially, and I guess being the main pre-accredited provider here in Horsham, we were keen to be involved as much as possible, because this is a field certainly that a lot of our pre-accredited students have been shown interest in, and we haven't had any relationships with any RTOs or TAFE around this course. So it has been on the back burner for us for some time, because we've had interest from students, but we haven't necessarily had a pathway. So the real key for us was to, I suppose, and WDEA run the course. We've been really lucky that they provided us with the trainer to deliver the course, and they've got the content. So really, from our point of view, we can't take credit for any of the actual delivery or any of the course at all, because that's all WDEA's end. But really, from our point of view, where we can take a little bit for is really just being able to promote to our existing students and give them an opportunity to touch on what might be involved in an early childhood course without actually enrolling, and also doing that in a really safe, comfortable place that they're already studying in. So that was really our focus, and what worked quite well with the first cohort. The delivery was run over 4 weeks, so it was 1 day a week over 4 weeks, and it was coincided with the same day that the Cert 3 in early childhood was being run by WDEA, and it was due to start on that 5th week. So essentially, we used this as a way of Cindy, the trainer, understanding where people's skill sets were at, giving them a good idea of what the course entailed, and then really focusing in on would they be suitable and what other supports they might need before they enrol. And I think Nathan could probably talk about the kind of enrolment process, but I do know, in that early stages, we did have one of our students, for example, that wasn't eligible for fee reduction. So she was not on a, I don't know what sort of visa she was on, but she wasn't eligible. So Nathan could talk to that. So it was the course fees, I think, were quite substantial. So we've been able to encourage her to look at other options until she gets residency, so that she can then get a fee reduction. So yeah, from our point of view, it's worked really well. We've got another cohort starting on the 1st of June. So, and that's the same. It'll be leading into a second intake of that Cert 3 course. It's been a bit slower this time around. We're not sure if it's because we ran one already and we might have lost interest, or whether it's the wrong time of the year. We've tried to do it 2 days a week over 2 weeks, so that may also be a barrier that we've just got to look at for next time, what will work for people. But Nathan, I think, if you're happy to talk, I think just talking about what, from your end, what you guys have been doing, because you've done most of the work in this space.
No worries. Thanks, Robbie, and good morning to everyone else. Look, it's been a really interesting but very pleasing and positive collaboration with all involved, and as I think we're all in agreement that it's such a skills shortage. So without this collaboration taking place, I don't think we would have achieved the results that we have. So it's been a really important one, and it's been, as Robbie said, there's been a lot of trial and error, and I think it's, from our point of view, and I think maybe Georgina mentioned it earlier, because we are a little bit smaller and obviously a not-for-profit, we can operate on fairly small margins, which is to our benefit. So we can achieve that a little bit easier. But for us, it's a two-pronged attack. It's a case for us to really display what the early childhood industry and sector is all about. So that's the first part, to see whether the students are real, or the participants are really interested in becoming students ultimately. And then the next phase is for our trainer to see whether these students are ready to undertake the Certificate 3 level. So it's very two-pronged, but given that situation, and then it can either offer that pathway directly into the Certificate 3, or we can work closely with Robbie to say, okay, what else might be available for these students to do in the interim, to maybe, whether it's upskill or look at other options in that region. So for us, it's been really an important process, because we're also a Learn Local provider, but obviously Robbie and the Centre participation is Learn Local in the Wimmera. So we're starting to look at those trial and error and in our LGAs where we can provide that same Learn Local. So we're really looking at 2022 as a pilot year, and like Robbie said, we've looked at operating 1 day a week over 4 weeks. We're looking at operating 2 days a week over 2 days, whether that's more palatable. So we're just trialing and erroring. So we'll continue that rollout and do a similar process ourselves in Portland coming up. And in Hamilton as well as Warrnambool. And our numbers in Warrnambool have been a little bit lower than what we probably would have expected, but we're seeing a little bit of a balance from the initial intake and to here. So I guess we'll be really interested to see, and I wouldn't expect that we'd have the mid-year numbers in any given year anyway. But for us, even if it is another 3, 4, 5, we have the ability to still pick them up mid-year. We don't have to have a cohort of 10 or 12 in order to engage them, because I think it's that point of getting them interested, and if they've got to wait another 3, 4, 5, 6 months in order to enrol, I think that's when we lose them.
The other thing that we did that we've had some challenges with is 5 of the 10 that we did our early childhood course, pre-accredited course with, were our ESL students. So we've had some language barriers, and from that, Sally at By Fives worked with us to develop a new A-frame for study support in this space. So we're actually, I've still got to send it off to regional office to get approval yet. So the plan is to have some study support available for the students. So they're going to work. Anyone that we think needs support can be supported by another pre-accredited trainer, and through Cindy's, the trainers networks, she's actually found someone that we can employ that's in the sector already. And the person who we are going to be employing, I've spoken to. She's actually attended one of the classes already before I even employed her, so she was quite keen. But she has shown an interest in potentially being a trainer as well. So it's really good for us to be able to encourage that pathway for someone that's already in the field to potentially have a soft entry point to training and assessment. And if this works for her and she likes it, then potentially we can encourage a PD opportunity do a TAE and then have another trainer in the field, which I think will be really positive as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the collaboration that you guys undertook can't be understated in the way that you worked so closely together when you didn't have that space, and the way that, like in terms of Woodia, having the authority to operate in Horsham, etc. And I think it has been such an amazing collaboration. I think the continued support for the students has been fantastic. The way that the service providers in the Wimmera were brought in, so we had the PSFO, we had other service providers that came in and talked with the students, and I think that was a really positive experience for our service providers. And just one of the service providers spoke about what it's like to work in early childhood, and listening to them speak and seeing the way that students were engaged with that was fantastic. So I think it's been a really great experience all around, I think, for as a great example of collaboration. So Lisa, I can see that you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, so I just wanted to question whether there'd been any uptake, for any of our Aboriginal families, parents, people. Nope. Okay. I have had a couple of interested people, mums of playgroup that I've been working with. So yeah, I think I'm going to have to support them a little bit more to reach out to the services and yeah, jump on programs. So cool. Thanks for that.
It'd be great, especially because we've got the intake, and we'll send out the flyer, etc., with the minutes as well for that June intake. But it would be great to get a few of those mums into the pre-accredited course. So
absolutely, yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Rach, I might just jump in. There's a few comments and things in the chat that I neglected to pass on before. A lot of love going on there. Great idea, Miriam. Great work, Miriam. Also, the other thing is that not everyone stays in. You need a constant flow of staff. And then from Sharon Askew, Tracy, just as an FYI, yep, a trainee only has to spend 15 hours a week at the service, and the government are offering an incentive to all providers, private, public and not-for-profit, 50% of wages being subsidised. We might be able to touch base with Sharon for a bit more information on that one. Lee from FedTAFE, happy to assist where required. Emily, oh, great work, everyone. Well done, team. Sharon, ask you if we have anyone interested who cannot raise the funds to become a student, please reach out, as Community Kids Horsham and Roscoe Avenue Nurture 1, that's in Hamilton, could provide trainee hours of 15 hours a week where training is paid for by the services. So no cost to the prospective trainee. Please let me know if you've anyone who might be interested but does not have the funds to get started. Fantastic. All right, back to you, Rachel. And if probably pause if anyone's got any comments or questions before we move on.
Sorry, I just didn't catch who you said in Horsham could potentially do that, provide that opportunity.
This is Sharon. Oh, Sharon, are you here? Would you like to speak to it?
Can offer, and Nurture 1 Roscoe Avenue in Hamilton.
It was Community Kids, Robbie. I don't know whether you got the first one, Community Kids Horsham.
Pop my email address in the chat, Robbie.
Thank you.
Excellent. So if there's no further questions, maybe we'll just move on to our next part of our agenda, which is really we would love to hear from others as well. We know that there's plenty of work happening at the moment with all of our stakeholders, so really keen to hear others that might like to share what they've been up to as well. Actually, sorry, I think we were going to use a Jamboard on this one, Deb, so I will chuck a Jamboard in the chat on this. So if you go to the chat and you look at the Jamboard that is there, hopefully the link works okay. And you can actually jump into it. What we'd like people to look at this point in time is just what are some of the actions that you've completed in the past 6 months to increase workforce?
Everyone familiar with the jam board? With the jam board, you write a little sticky note and put on this few shakes of the head. If people want to say things, I'm happy to type them into the jam board. I'm going to share my
Traineeship
screen.
sounds great, by the way.
Do you want me to share my screen so people can see it?
Mm.
I can do that. She says.
Who was the 7 traineeships, incidentally?
Rachel, you
Yeah.
cannot expect me to do sticky notes and then come back to another screen in an efficient manner.
Well, I was patiently waiting. I didn't like just jump on board. That's excellent. How's that going?
We've got 6 and we're recruiting for 1 more, and we cobbled together all of our office positions where there was like a 0.2 or a 0.1 or a point, bits of pieces of positions to do work with the trainees and coordination and support a bit more so that they're well supported.
Excellent.
So we've had that person on a week. She's got COVID now, so it'll just be great when that fires up. And we've also started work with the trade training cluster about positioning our region or our LGA for a transition to early years in our region and making it a really seamless process. And we're looking at what's possible in terms of any educators that have done that dreadful training and assessment course that everyone hates. Seeing who's done that course and who might be able to, like what collaboration we can do.
That's excellent. Did you we'll have to hear more about that, but probably another meeting. Did you have any feedback around the the way that you guys have supported trainees or your placements in general? Have you had any key learnings around that, given that you now have 7 or will have 7, from your own perspective?
The lady that spoke earlier about just can't see what her name is now, about long delays in signing people up, that has been an issue. And I think there's been a strategic maybe oversight or misalignment where, people have been able to previously do Certificate 3 and then kind of move smoothly through to diploma. Well, that's not the case now. So that's actually added an unnecessary burden, I think, to a sector in the midst of a fantastic reform. So that I did mention that to Andrew Hardiman the other day, actually, because we sort of all just found out about that by default. The trainees, I think, so we want to do 2-year positions. So we've done one that's certificate 3, and then has started on their diploma now. And I guess our idea is to have one attached to each service. And we've started a little long daycare program that we've got a small venue that we've actually got a grant for to refurb, and that's kind of our little training centre. So we've got 2 trainees working out of there on any one day if they don't get pinched to go to another service to help out.
Excellent.
I've got to say, that's excellent, Katie. And I've got to say, I reckon 12 months ago, if we had have asked this question, there would be like a few sticky notes. There's an absolute, full board of sticky notes with actions that people are doing, which is that's fantastic. We'll send that out with the notes as well, but I don't think everyone can actually see it.
Probably the other thing is,
Yes,
oh,
sorry.
sorry, Rach, do
Hang
you
on.
want to go?
No, go.
So I think the other thing is, we've got a number of bachelor people doing the accelerated bachelors, and that's good. And also, what's the other one? Oh, I just forgot what the other one was. But there's a real kind of everyone's learning. Everyone's on this kind of learning thing at the moment. So I think that any opportunities you have for, doing that would be really good across because we know that we've got an aging workforce as well, particularly in the ECT area. So
Yep.
I feel really optimistic about that.
That's good. Conscious of time, but did anyone else want to share something that they've been doing? Oh, Andrew, I can see that you're talking, but I can't hear you properly.
Sorry, is that all clear now?
That's better. Yeah, you're good now.
Thanks, yeah. And thanks for having me along. I've just finished a statewide pathways meeting. But a quick update is that there is a groundswell of funding around the vet delivered to school students, and early childhood is certainly on the core list, but it does fall under community services. So I have a number of vet clusters that have got ambitions to deliver this for students into 2023, and the courses will be funded. The challenge point is certainly finding available trainers. But the second point and a question that's raised was, is there a minimum age from the service provider for students to do structured workplace learning? So from an industry point of view, most vet clusters allow it for 15-year-olds, but there was some murmurings that it might have been 16 for early childhood, and if there's any clarification on that.
I think that's the best answered by date.
Yeah, it's something we're going to have to follow up. So
we were of the view that it was 16.
Yeah, I guess I can clarify things from the debt perspective and policy, but it was just in case there was something from an industry perspective to do with working with children's checks or any sort of validation of minimum age from the industry perspective.
See, Tracy's got her hand up. Did you have a comment on it, Tracy?
I didn't have an answer to that question. I was actually just going to ask. I suppose with the vet students, they would never be working on their own. So for us, the age, I mean, we probably haven't thought about it. But again, you're looking at those sort of 10, 11, 12 students. So it's probably not so much of an issue, I don't think. I was just going to ask about, remember we talked about at the original workforce meeting, or one of the early ones, about doing a survey of who'd been through qualifications and then hadn't started working in, we were just saying there just doesn't seem to be, all these people training, but then are they actually landing on the ground in the industry? Did anything ever happen?
Yeah, we did do that survey. We have it, as far as I know, and the service providers, the training providers here might be able to speak to whether they actually distributed those in the end, because I know that they were talking about distributing them and had agreed to do so. So we'd had Fed TAFE, WDIA and Southwest TAFE all agree to sending out the survey. I think we've had 5 responses to the survey, so not enough to really give anything meaningful, unfortunately. And the people that did respond, because it was going out to all past students, and the people that did respond were working in the sector already. So it was probably less helpful. So it is something, we have the survey there. We would love to give it another crack at getting it out, maybe through other means. I don't know what other means might be helpful, but I think getting that insight would be invaluable, because then it does actually allow us to have an evidence-informed response to the workforce. Given that these people already have their qualifications, how can we then target the messaging to get those people back into the sector potentially? So that's certainly something I would be really keen if anyone has any ideas on how we think we could get a greater uptake. By 5 are looking at doing something in the Wimmera that will be similar but different, and I'm really curious. They're going to use sort of a software that is designed for text message responses to a survey. And so just really curious as to whether that ends up being quite a better methodology for getting it out than just sending an email out to past students. So yeah, it's definitely something that we'll be looking at revisiting. And once we get that learning from the by 5 survey, then we might have a better way of doing it. But if anyone else has any ideas, very keen to hear them.
Because I think, as we've talked before, you know, it's all well and good doing all this workforce work.
Absolutely.
But if we're only staying in the industry for a few years, it's so much time and effort and
Absolutely.
money wasted if we can't keep them.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So if no one has anything, sorry, Deb.
So I was just going to ask Tim if he's able to have the audio. Just I noticed the other day there was a West Wimmera Shire were advertising a early childhood immersion in, program in collaboration with the LEN. And I just wondered if Tim had any comment or more information about that to share. I could pop it on a sticky note.
Yeah, hi Debbie. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, great. Yeah, look, that went ahead. We had students from both Goroke, P12 College and Conniva College attend early years centres in those towns. So Di, our structured workplace learning coordinator and vet coordinator, has been working with a lot of the early years providers across the region and facilitating school visits for students.
Great idea.
I was just going to say, now we get to the what next. So if you want to go on the Jamboard as well and click on the next, so the same Jamboard, sorry, but click on to the next page. It'd be great to hear from everybody what one action is that will be done in the next 6 months. So just really looking at a commitment from all of us to one action. I think the reality is that we all have a role to play, and the more of us that take on those smaller actions, hopefully the cumulative effect. And we've heard so many of, you know, some really great collaborations today. But one of the things that I've noticed is even some of the smaller things, such as changing the language. You know, when I compared the Fed TAFE flyers for the Cert 3 in early childhood education and care for this year compared with last year, it's a much more professional view of the sector when you see the wording that's being used. And I think it's just, even those small things are starting to be seen, you know, reflected across all of the area. And so it'd be really great to just hear some of the things that people would like to do to commit to for the next 6 months.
Okay, we've got consolidate and continue to tell the story and promote the early childhood sector. Utilise the senior secondary reform to promote early childhood as a pathway for vet clusters in our area across the Wimmera South West. Reaching out to our community to see if I can capture some more interest in studying and working in early years. Support and guide those interested in making contact with appropriate services. Liaise a taster event in the Southern Grampians for Year 9 students in ECL. Develop one-page flyer for prospective students in each LGA of all key contacts and EC pathways.
Sorry, Deb, that's our action. But I just wanted to check in, and this doesn't have to be answered necessarily now, but when we met with our Southwest working group, actually, it's probably just a question for Tim. When we met with our Southwest working group, the lens that Southwest and Glenelg Southern Gramps lens both suggested that in that flyer, it's much better to have the LEN as the key contact for, rather than, you know, people going to providers specifically, that kind of thing. I just wanted to check whether or not that would be the case in the Wimmera Southern Mallee as well.
Yeah, certainly. We're happy to
Great.
take that.
Thanks for that. I feel like counting all the people in the meeting and then counting the sticky notes on the Jamboard and going, hang on just a minute. We need some more actions here. I know we have lost a few people through the course of the meeting too, so, you know, just have a mass exodus now after I say that.
Yeah. All right. I think that brings us to the end of our agenda, and I'm absolutely amazed that we're able to finish on time because there's lots of content and lots of discussion. Does anyone have any final comments that they want to make before we close?
Sorry, Deb, I just want to ask, who just put in about looking at hiring a career trainee? Yeah, awesome, Tracy. How's that? Like, how are you going about that? Wait, hang on, sorry, yeah.
I haven't got that far.
Yeah, cool.
We've been working on, or I have been working on, I should say, the royal way, a Koori inclusion plan as part of it. And we've got a really fabulous KPSA now, which is exciting. And so even our services, she's doing some really great work. She's actually doing placement as a trainee in one of our services as well. So I think that's the next step for us. I would really like to.
Yeah, fantastic.
With her to have that discussion yet.
That's exciting. Yeah.
Really we actually have a mum in one of our services who I think would be fabulous, but she's got 2 little ones with complex needs, and so she's probably not right in the right space at the moment. But I did chat to the teacher at that service and said we need to, get her volunteering in our service and just support her as much as we can, because I think she would be fabulous.
That's so good.
We have one and have for a while.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I noticed there's a sticky note from I'm an ECT trained teacher available to mentor Aboriginal students. That's fantastic.
Rach, can I just make a point? I think I'd just encourage anyone and everyone just to continue to ask the questions, because I know we're all bound in our own little worlds by different amounts of red tape, but to keep the ongoing communications going, because it doesn't always have to be one stream that we can help each other with. There's always another option or another way. So I think it's there's a lot of questions always around eligibility in different worlds, for different funding streams, and where one may not be able to assist, maybe another one can. So I guess that it's just about always asking that question. And I know, like even our example before in the Wimmera, Robbie has been able to provide the example around the funding to support the ESL students. And that's the ability, and Georgina can probably help attest, that we can use the flexibility of our Learn Locals in order to provide different options that's going to help service our communities. So when we've got that flexibility in order to do that, keep asking the questions, because we don't know how we can assist, as from an RTO point of view and a Learn Local point of view, we don't know how we can assist without knowing how we can assist in some instances. So if people can keep asking the questions, and if we can help out, most definitely we will.
That's one of the things I think from these meetings, like from certainly this is sort of more of a strategic overarching meeting that we can have our key players come together, etc. But when we get into the working group side of things, I think we've seen some such interesting collaborations because those questions are being asked, because people are sharing the experiences that they've got as well. And I think it's just been invaluable, and we've seen so many great things that have come about because of that. So it would be great for that to continue. Georgina.
And just to add on to that, pre-accredited, which is what the Learn Locals deliver, it's the only government funding that actually has the flexibility to be tailored to the needs of the learner and the employer. So we have great flexibility. So whatever's needed to get that student on the pathway to get a job or a further education, we can design it around that.
That's been so great in this
cohort
at the moment.
Sorry,
is there any equipment being funded for trainees, like a laptop and a telephone?
The Minister has been recognising that a lot of Learn Local students actually, that's been a real problem in COVID, And Caesar McMillan, who's the parliamentary secretary, has actually been doing a bit of a pilot of repurposing some devices from the department and actually giving them out to some of the providers who are Learn Locals to actually support the delivery. It's a small start. We're reviewing it at the moment, but they're wanting to look at that as an ongoing way of working, that any departmental devices as they get old get repurposed and handed out into the community. We'll see how we go.
Well, I would have thought that things like that are given to volunteer groups, not new students. I don't mean to be disrespectful at all. It's just that hairdressing, people, they get little kits. The children are getting wonderful kits. We need to support our trainees also with the tools they need to do their jobs, which includes access to IT.
Yeah, this is from the Learn Local sector, so I don't know what else has been done elsewhere. That was really focused on our needs, because we work with the most disadvantaged learners, and we were working with a lot of students in the public housing buildings in North Melbourne and Flemington, and that's where we needed to support them. So that's where the focus went.
Perhaps that's something that Deet can look into.
We always take on board your ideas, Katie. This is something we always do. So we will absolutely take it on. And it is something, just to make the point though, in the pre-accredited course that we've had in Horsham, we've had a couple of people who have had issues with technology, and we've kind of looked at, the group has looked at different creative ways of trying to access that additional funding to be able to get those resources. So it's not necessarily like to date, it hasn't been part and parcel, but there has been ways of getting those resources where needed. So it's something that, hopefully collaborations will continue to allow these kinds of things to happen.
Yeah, I might just ask our local IT guy next time he's up what happens to the laptops.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would want my old one. That was really bad.
Yeah. But there might be other organisations as well that have a program. Anyway, food for thought. It's a good one, Katie. All right, people are dropping off like flies. Everyone's got other meetings to go to. I just wanted to double check when you wanted to catch up again, whether did you want to make it term 3 or it's 6 months' time? What sort of frequency? Local jobs programs funding for employment pathway activities. Okay, it's good to know. So are we thinking mid to late term 3 or term 4? Put your hand up for term 3. Okay, hand up for term 4. I can't see everyone's hands. That was silly, wasn't it?
Deb, don't forget the job fair. You might have mentioned it at the top of the meeting, but I was late.
No, I did not mention the job fair. It's the 27th of May, isn't it?
27th of May.
Yes.
We've got it linked in our resources that we'll send out post-meeting, but we haven't discussed it today. So good to have that mentioned.
We have the Western Vic Careers Expo coming up as well, that we're going to do a combined stall with the Wimmera providers and by 5 and the trainers as well. All right, so thank you everybody. If you've got any feedback around these meetings, how you think they could run more smoothly or things to do, not do, please feel free to pass that feedback to Rachel and I. And thanks so much for your time and everyone's efforts. And
also,
next
sorry,
time.
just with I was going to say, with the hands that I did see, it looked like next term is the go. So we'll put something in for next term. So
yeah, terrific.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Thanks everyone. See you.
Bye.
See you later, everyone.
Thank you. See ya.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Katie, oh, she's gone.
Might have to go into another meeting, Deb, because I know Shelley had to leave momentarily. So I'll just create a new one.
Yeah, cool.
All right, beautiful. Thanks. Oh, actually, no, sorry, she's gone.
That's all right.
There we go. Okay. just going to copy the chat as well.
Do you want to stop the recording?
Oh, yeah.